it's crazy. Like it's the difference between, 60 people seeing something and 3,000. It can be that easy.
Welcome back to the I Like Networking podcast. Today we have a conversation with Jessica Barlow, who is one of the mentors for a 2021 mentoring scheme. She not only has put words into Obama's mouth, but also founded two businesses in the middle of this pandemic. If anyone knows how to pivot careers, Jess is that person. I hope you have a lot of fun listening to this as much as I did. Jess Barlow, welcome to the I Like Networking podcast.
Thank you for having me.
You are one of our 2021 mentors, which I'm very excited
Me
about.
too.
So, this will give hopefully more people an opportunity to meet you if they don't get to work with you directly.
hmm
So, before we kick things off, can you just formally introduce yourself, as in where you're from, where you're currently based, and what is it that you do?
So, hello everyone. Hello podcast listeners. My name is Jessica Barlow. I live in London. I've been in London for 15 years. Before that, I grew up in Hong Kong. And I'm currently an entrepreneur. I started my career in advertising, and I worked in advertising for about 8 years. Worked with honestly like all the coolest brands you could imagine, but I got a bit disillusioned with the industry. And I left and I pivoted. I worked in tech for a little while, and then I decided to do my own thing. Started two businesses in the pandemic, and now I'm still in the pandemic, just trying to grow my little baby businesses at the moment.
Amazing. We're going to get to all of your current businesses. But before we get there, can you just, we were talking about business crashes just before this podcast started. So can you tell us what was your worst job experience or your biggest career failure to date?
So I think this is a really interesting question in terms of how you phrased it, because I don't see it as a failure. I see it as like a wonderful bump on my road to bring me here. Like I'm really grateful in hindsight that it put me on the path I'm at today. But one of my worst job experiences was um, before I left advertising. I was unfortunately in a scenario where I dealt with some like bullying, you could say. And I had a uncomfortable time in a company where I kept trying to make it work, but it just really felt like, it wasn't happening. Um, and it taught me it taught me in hindsight like real resilience, but in the moment I felt like a shell of myself. Like if you met me then, you would be like, who are you compared to who you're talking to today? So why I don't kind of think of it as a failure is that, I was able to find myself again afterwards, and but it was still the worst experience in the moment because like I totally burnt out. I really lost myself. I lost all my confidence. I didn't kind of know who I was anymore because I was so wrapped up in kind of like that scenario where you have, management on top of you and you feel like no one's on your side, and you're like, when you take a step back, years later, and you realize, oh wow, that was like textbook bullying, like proper schoolyard bullying, but you're a professional, and it happens far more than you think. So worst experience, but I'm grateful that it, created the path I'm on now.
I love that, Jess. Did you feel like that at the time, that it was like a bump in the road, or did you feel it quite hard?
Oh my god, no. I was not that positive in the moment. I wish I could be like, yeah, I was totally zen. No, I mean, when I say I burnt out, I properly like I had already chosen to leave and I was working my notice period and things were so miserable. Even though I was leaving, it didn't change this kind of environment. It in some moments I felt like it was even worse. And I went to my GP and I got signed off and I properly was like, burnt out. The kind that you read about and you're like, what is that? The kind where you can't like get out of bed, you can't read a book, you can't watch TV, you feel incredibly disconnected from yourself and the world. And I had to spend some time to like heal and find myself again. And I like, to be honest with you, I was really, really embarrassed in the moment because I was like, who am I? What did I become? How is this? how is this real life? I'd always, for so many years, connected my self-worth to my career really, really heavily. And so in that moment, I was like, oh my God, who am I? I had to find my identity again outside of being connected to a job and actually, frankly, an industry which was not healthy for me anymore. So in the moment, I definitely wasn't feeling it. It's taken some, I don't know, healing, therapy, time, success probably afterwards to make me realize that, like, I'm good. I can do this. I can be okay. But it's also taught me like huge amounts of like empathy and understanding. Not even like for everyone around me, because I've always been an incredibly empathetic person, but towards myself. I think that it's made me realize that if not I'm not okay, I'm not gonna be able to do anything.
Yeah, 100%. I think that's actually quite common in our industry, the creative industries. People do get really wrapped up in their sense of self and their sense of what is it that they do for a living, which is good in some ways, but very complicated. And if you were already kind of done with what you were doing before, that can be quite difficult. I know you didn't start working in marketing or as an entrepreneur. So can you just give us a quick overview of what you studied at school or university, and then where did you get your first sort of big opportunity, or where you've realized that you had a career per se?
So I definitely had a bit of a bumpy ride into getting a job in London. So I moved here when I was 18, from Hong Kong, where I was born, and I went to art school. So I went to Central St. Martin's. I was studying graphic design, and I kind of wasn't smart about it. So anytime I had like, and when you have like summer holidays or Easter holidays, I was homesick. I went home a lot in my first couple of years because it was a new scary place, London. And so I didn't kind of do all of the smart things that I think that, the most savvy of students do now, where they start getting internships in the middle of their school year. Or because I was at art school, it wasn't like a credit requirement the same way that it might be in other courses. So when I graduated, I was like, "Wow, what do I do now?" I had done a illustration kind of tangent to the degree, so I was like, "Okay, so the options are be an illustrator, get paid to illustrate stuff, probably sit alone in your bedroom drawing and like being lonely." And I'm such a people person. I love like being around people and also just kind of like talking and communicating. That the idea of that was really, really sad. Like I felt it deep in my gut, the sadness of the idea of what like a illustrator career would be. Bearing in mind that I know people who are creative and illustrators and they work like this, and I think that it's so wonderful and so exciting that it just couldn't be less me. And so I started kind of looking at avenues. And in my last year at uni, I was having a conversation with my tutor, this guy called Andrew, and I feel like I owe him like a debt of gratitude because he said to me once, 'cause I was really close to leaving my degree, so I was just not enjoying this, the idea of what path I was setting myself up for. But I'm also like I'm half Chinese, and you don't give up. Very, very like high expectations of myself, expecting myself to succeed. I still left uni with a first, like I that was all gonna happen. But I was like, where do I go next, right? So this guy Andrew tells me, have you ever thought about advertising? And it lit a bit of a spark in me that meant that when I did graduate and I started looking for opportunities, I did, and it's like so crazy because I graduated in 2009, so it was like peak, excuse me, peak recession. But I did 5 unpaid internships before I got a job, and they were all in various kind of like marketing, PR, advertising kind of companies. And it made me realize that I was good at stuff. I could do this. I could like, manage a project. I could make something happen. And my big break, I guess, was in the last company that I was interning for. I had been there for 2 months, and it was a 3-month internship. I was really enjoying it. I was basically doing a real job at that point. There was no there was no, like, intern scenario. I wasn't being taught or guided, I was working. Um, and I essentially, got propositioned, was that the right term, by my previous like, a previous intern employer. They were hiring. And so they wanted to hire me, but I didn't want to work there. So instead, I went to the place I was currently interning at, which I did want to work at. And I said, look, this other people want to hire me, and, I'd rather work here, but this is a job offer and I have to take it seriously. And so I negotiated that into getting a job at the place I wanted to work at. But the thing that really sweetened the deal is that my starting salary was 8 grand more than what the offer was at the other company. So I think it all worked in my favor. Very long-winded story that, but I hope that you followed along.
Yeah, yeah, no, but that's amazing. You when you talked to us, you gave a sort of a seminar to us last year on pivoting, and you were very good at like I don't know exactly how to put this, but like framing yourself, like how you would talk about yourself to potential employers and all
Mhm.
of that. And I think that comes, you can tell that by how you speak. You speak very clearly about yourself.
Oh,
Does that
thank
make sense?
you.
That's supposed to be a good thing.
I mean, I think, like, we forget when if you're known for, okay, I am a graphic designer, or I am an art director, and I am an event producer, you forget that you are your number one salesperson. You are your, like, hype man, your hype woman. There's no one else who's going to be in the room with you making sure that you get a promotion or you get a job or you, like, secure the interview. You've got to have your own back. And if you can't do this naturally, it's like a muscle you really need to flex and work on and get yourself comfortable to do it. Um, it's something that will, like, really change your career if you get comfortable with, I mean, essentially like self-promotion or backing yourself.
Yeah, no, 100%. Can I ask you something, Jess, that I don't think
Mhm.
we touched upon last time? Is did you was there any reason why you wanted to come to London in the first place? Did you have family here? Like, what was your main drive to move out of Hong Kong?
That is such a good question, because I feel like it was a bit of a whim. So I was really lucky when I was, kind of like in the years of graduating and very close to getting my, like, results for my A levels. I went to an English school in Hong Kong, so I was doing A levels. And in the kind of, months when we were waiting for our results, I did quite well at school at the time, and we're expecting it to be like to go well. And my mom asked me once, and I remember this like vividly because it was in a car ride. And I don't know if it's the same for other people's parents, but like all the serious chat is always in a car ride when, like, mom's driving and not looking at you, and then she drops the bomb of something like really heavy. Um, but this was a fun conversation. She asked me, "So where is like the Harvard for art or art schools? Like where would be like the best place to go?" Bearing in mind that before this, I thought, and I had visited schools in New Zealand, which is where my sister went to university, where she still lives now, where I was expecting to kind of like, go to a school and have a very different life, I guess. And when my mom asked me that, I was like, well, there are schools that are really well known in New York and in London. And then I started, the balls kind of were in motion after I got my results, and like, I got straight A's. I was very, very proud, and she was proud. And so we started looking at other opportunities. So I ended up in London from my mom being open to it and asking me. And then my, like, art teacher at the time in high school basically suggesting that I apply to Central St. Martin's. It does have a really great reputation. And then probably a part of me being like too emotionally invested in, the application process to bother doing it all over again. I got into one school in New York, and then Central St. Martin's, and then the other deadlines were further, like, a couple months later, and I was like, "I'm tired. Let's go to London." So that's how I ended up in London.
That's amazing. But your mom sounds like she was supportive of your sort of arts future,
Oh,
even though
definitely.
it's not the most traditional one, I guess.
Yeah, I think, like, it's been really, it's been really, like, evident that I mean, both of my parents are actually entrepreneurs themselves. So I think there's maybe as an element of them kind of forging their own path and realizing that they maybe want the same for their kids. But I've always had you can do whatever you want scenario. But I think for me, what mattered for me is to like turn that into a career and into like a real work scenario, and not think about like sitting back or resting or playing at this being a career. I never kind of like thought, okay, I'll just have a go at being an illustrator. It was very clear to me, like, oh, I don't see this. I can't see this through. I'm gonna have to find other options. And there's also like a massive element of privilege here that I know not everybody has. But when I was excuse me, when I was working in all of those internships unpaid, it was because I had my parents' support. And that's not always possible for people. And also, I mean, frankly, there are not so many unpaid internships nowadays as there were back then. That there are more paid opportunities at that level. But I'm really lucky that I had that support to be able to even try it, because I think otherwise it's very likely that I could be, in Hong Kong, working with my mom. It could have been a very different life, but it wasn't what I wanted. And my sister, she lives in Auckland, and she's also very creative. She's like a nail technician and a makeup artist. Um, and it's great to be able to know that you can own that.
That's amazing. I love that story. And 100% I agree with the privilege part. And of course, that's one of the things that led us all to bond together to work on, I like networking, but that doesn't take away your hustle in any case, because I think this is the really interesting part, or one of the really interesting parts of your career, is that at some point you get out of marketing, you decide to kind of try to work in the food industry, right?
Yeah. So,
So can you tell us a little bit about that?
so basically, at this point, excuse me, I had like left this advertising company where I burnt out. I wasn't happy. I was like obviously like lost my confidence, kind of lost my direction a little bit. And in that moment, I was like, okay, Jess, now is the time. Now is the time that you finally do your own thing. I've been in the back of my head thinking I would have my own company, my own project, my own anything one day, right? And I've had that for years. I just never knew what that thing was. And then in kind of like a couple months after I left that company, and basically I found like I had to heal my body and my mind. But I once I was back to like, okay, I've got to like get going with something. I thought, okay, I'm gonna start a food brand. I'm gonna bring something to life. I've always wanted to bring a brand to life and do all of the logos and branding and outreach and get it in people's hands and kind of like see that whole story through. And I had visited my sister in New Zealand, and I got inspired by the health food scene there. And I saw this product that I thought, you know what, it would be so cool to launch that product in London. It's like a bread. It's very cool. It like doesn't have any grains, but it looks like and tastes like it does. Still doesn't exist in London, by the way. So if someone's listening to this and they're really good at baking, I still think you should do this. But in order to make that jump and launch this brand, I was like, okay, I have no idea what I'm doing. I don't know how to do this. I'm not a big baker myself. I don't even really know what it's like working for like a food startup. So I went to a talk once, and it was like how to start a business, like one of those like just talks about the things that you should do. And this happened to be like how to start a business in like the wellness industry. Um, and I was thinking of a bit of a healthy product, so I thought, okay, well maybe this will help me. And one piece of advice from that talk has stuck with me forever, and it was, if you're trying to do something, can you get someone else to pay you to do that thing so that you can learn and so that you can like learn while earning? Um, And so I found a consulting gig with a tiny food startup. It was like a frozen smoothie brand. And I worked with them for 6 months building the brand, kind of like in a head of marketing function with zero brand money. Just like, doing trade shows and getting the word out there on social media, going like building an Instagram from, like 0 to 5K, all of that kind of stuff. And I realized in those 6 months that I absolutely didn't want to start a food brand. Like it was such a great exercise in, it's happened to me since in my career, even like this year. It's a really great exercise in what I call like gathering the data, being able to make the decision to know when you don't want to do something. So yeah, I gathered the data and I realized that like, okay, I really, really don't want to start a food brand because I watched the kind of trials and tribulations of struggling to get into retailers and how you only have one shot and like the time when they change the stuff that's on the shelves happens like once a year and oh it just it was painful to watch it that I just thought okay this isn't for me and then I was back to the drawing board and I kept my options way open and I started interviewing in loads of different places so like big fashion brands, tech platforms, entertainment platforms. And then I ended up at a tech company, which was my last job before I went kind of self employed. And the funny thing is, that company hired me for those 6 months that I was consulting, not my 8 years of relevant experience in advertising. So it's kind of funny that it all came full circle because that was a wonderful job.
I love that advice. I love that story. And it's funny how it's always, well, it's not always, but it's often like those random things that stick with us.
Oh, yeah, I feel like I remember it word for word. It couldn't be more glued in my brain.
Yeah, it's so weird what resonates with us, right? It's just like a random thing that will happen. But I love that. And I think that's a really smart decision to just try to get someone to pay you for it. And that's the thing, like you need to learn how to leave, right? When it's not for you.
Yeah,
I think as much as it's important to learn how to get into places, it's really important to know when it's time to go.
so
So you're
true.
not stuck.
So true. I mean, also, there was this moment when it was like, we wanna give you equity. We wanna bring you, like, on board properly, but that means that we're gonna, like, stop paying you. And in that moment, I was like, "This is not working." Like, this is not, where you think it's going, and it's not, like, the right path for me. And the funny thing is that, like, the brand doesn't exist anymore. So I was right, I was right to leave. But also I think it really shows like I think there's a certain sexiness about working in like a foodie startup or a drink startup and bringing something to market, getting it in stores and getting it in people's homes and people's hands because it's like food is like a democratic item, right? You're so able to enjoy it all walks of life. It brings people together. So there's this real like desire or sexiness of like, yeah, I want to do the best vegan chocolate or I want to do the best overnight oats or whatever. But I think in the inside, when you're really there and you're realizing like you're at the mercy of retailers, you're at the mercy of like influencers wanting freebies and just realizing that it's not the dream that you thought it was, that was like huge for me. Because I could have learned that the hard way and, like, spent a bunch of money over 2 years and then had a product that flopped, but I learned it in 6 months and someone else's money.
Yeah, that which is the best way to do it. And you're right, the food business is super hard. I don't know if you know this about me, but I like to run and I'm obsessed with runners. So I follow like 100 runners. Like I keep up with the like Olympic trials. It's really strange because it's not a sport that I don't know. It's not like the most glamorous thing, but I find it because I'm very bad at sports, like really bad, like so bad. Like I love sports so much, but they really don't love me back. And so I have like no coordination, like don't throw a ball at me, like none of those things. Like I fell 100 times, I broke all of my bones, like it's definitely not for me, but I insist. Anyway, I like the fact that when you go to like originally like non-COVID times, you go to run like a marathon and like the pros are running the exact same thing as you on the exact same day, like it's one of the only sports that I
It's so
know of
true.
that you as a normal human compete with like this ridiculously fast, like abnormal people, like I don't understand how they run that fast. It's beyond my life because I'm very slow, obviously. As you guys can imagine from that introduction to my relationship with sports.
Yeah,
But
I'm definitely not a runner, but, like, I totally aspire to it. Like, I really love the idea of it, but whenever I try and I'm like, "I hate everything," and then I injure myself.
yeah, that is true. It took me a while to like it, to be honest. But yeah, now I'm obsessed. But in any case, I there's one runner who is married to a triathlete, and she retired and whatever, and they have like this, like bar, like protein bar, sort of like running food company,
Mhm.
right? Like stuff for athletes, right? And it grew a lot, and they both have like big followings on social media, right? Because she was sponsored by Nike, like they were big athletes, she won lots of stuff, someone went to the Olympics, like
Mhm.
big couple. And still, like they were like, oh, you need to hit I don't know how many millions to even start making a profit, like it's such a competitive market. And like Whole Foods is nothing, you need to be on, I don't know what's like a very like the Tesco of or the
Mhm.
Sainsbury's of the States. So it can be quite challenging. I thought it was like I don't know anything about that business, but I feel like it is a difficult one for sure.
It's just like, if you think about you're paying, £2 or $2 or something for this protein bar, and then they've gotta spend marketing, and they've gotta make sure that it got there, and the margins are as small as you can imagine, they're really, really thin. So you're playing like a volume game, and you're only gonna get volume if you're in the giant stores, and then you have to, like, make a lot of compromises to be in the giant stores. It's just like a vicious cycle. So the companies that do really succeed in this space, I'm always so blown away. And I'm so, like, happy and, like, impressed because I always feel like, "Wow, you did that? Wow." You know?
Yes, absolutely. But aside from that small deviation of our conversation, can you bring us back to your two companies? Because you were able to not only become an entrepreneur and launch one thing during COVID, you decided to launch two.
You know?
Uh, so one of them is more related to what you did before because it's around PR,
Mhm.
but the other one is in health, which fair enough, very useful right now. But can you tell us a little bit about how that went and how is it going?
Of course. So, in March 2020, I left my job in tech, which I loved. I was like head of comms of a really cool app. And I left in order to start a business with a really good friend of mine. So, the co founder in a business called Sunday Care Therapy, which is essentially care delivery in the home run by an occupational therapist. So occupational therapy is a part of healthcare where the therapists are there to help you hit your goals. So if you can, no longer get in and out of the bath, they will show you how you can perhaps do exercises to strengthen yourself to manage that again, or modifications to your space so that you can climb in and out with special stairs or something, right? um my co-founder is a good friend of mine. He pitched his business to me actually the year before, and we had been sitting on it for a little while and thinking, okay, are we going to do it? Are we going to do it? And we finally made the decision and we said yes. And then, I quit my job. And then we went into like a national lockdown, and I was like, wow, this is interesting. I no longer had the like precious holiday that I'd planned on the beach to kind of reset my mind from an employee to a founder. I no longer had like the ability to go and network with people face to face. Everything changed. But the interesting thing of moving from the kind of regular private sector that I've always been in to healthcare, which is highly regulated, is that we suddenly had so much time on our hands because we were um, kind of like organizing ourselves to get a license to operate. You have to register a business in this field. Um, and it took a really long time. Like they kept us waiting for a good 7, 8 months. Um, and so in that kind of downtime, there were other things we were doing, built a website, built a brand, but there was a lot that we couldn't do proactively. And so I had this, I don't know, strike of genius where I thought, if I, when I worked in tech, could teach myself to do PR on such a large scale and have success, having kind of gone in really scared, I could teach this to other people. So my other business was kind of born out of having a bit of downtime, dealing with the bureaucracy of my first business. And that's called No Agency Method. And it's essentially training for founders and startup teams to bring their PR in house instead of spending with an agency. So that's why I called it the No Agency Method. And it's been actually like so well received. I've taught so many people. Like I'd have to tally it up to see what my numbers are, but I think I'm almost at 100 um, people taught, and some really recognizable startup brands. I just wouldn't have expected that, and all out of a bit of a fluke in the summer. So yeah, those are my two businesses. And in terms of how they're going now, No Agency Method is very exciting. I'm kind of still teaching. Every now and then I teach live. Otherwise, it's an online self-paced course. Just last week, I had a text from someone who got into the grocer, which is like a really big deal if you work in food. Someone got into Unilad, which is a really big viral kind of publication. Someone got into the Stylist magazine, and also like Evening Standard. Like these things are possible, and it's so fulfilling for me to know that it works. And for the care business, we managed to get our license at the end of the year, which was huge for us. And we're essentially now recruiting and currently working on a lot of kind of community building and content creation in order to start talking to the right people. But it's an exciting time, feeling really, really positive.
I love that, Jess. Can I ask you just a few questions about the non-agency method?
Of course.
Because I know that we have a few entrepreneurs in our listeners and some people who want to do like online courses in different fields. So, one question
Hmm.
or just a comment is that I think it's important for people to know when they're jumping on the entrepreneur route that it's not like you already had this a list at least of contacts and people that you knew, right? Because I think if you just jump off on the unknown, it can be a bit hard. So did you already have like some sort, like how was your process of approaching clients? How did that happen? Like what was the process? Because right off the bat I saw that you were working with amazing brands, as you said. So how did that happen for you?
So I think it's a really great point to make in terms of I kind of set myself up for success from years of networking and making friends in the right places and just kind of, to be honest, being myself. So I know the founders of the team of the Copy Club really well. They're a entrepreneurial marketing network. They are fantastic. They do training, they do events. They're really, really great team. And so when I was thinking of this business, just thinking of it, I had a chat with the Copy Club and I said, would this be interesting? Like, do you think that people would like it? And then I signed like a little contract with them saying that I wouldn't teach it anywhere else. I'd just teach it with them. And that really opened the doors to a lot of exciting brands. But at the same time, in terms of people who've just come to me and done my online self-paced course, I just spent a lot of time in the pandemic meeting a lot of people. So my biggest suggestion is like get yourself out there and meet a lot of people. You don't have to tell them or sell to them. You just have to kind of be human and make a connection. And a lot of my sales for just the online side of it are literally people I've had a bit of a chat with, or they know me from someone who knows me. And it creates its own kind of spiral through word of mouth if you deliver results for people. So I think that's what I found really important is that I'm teaching something that really worked for me. And now when I turn around and see it really work for other people, um, that doesn't kind of that's not taken lightly by people. You know, they really appreciate that. But that wouldn't have happened if I didn't go out there, tell people it was happening. One of the things that really worked in my favor was I had to hold myself accountable to make this happen because it was only me and all me. And I had like a giant to do list of, record this lesson and create this thing. And it's a lot of work for one person. And so when I first had the idea and I like decided and I created the little brand and everything, I put it on social media and I said it was happening. And then I was held accountable almost by like a jury of my peers. And I felt this like guilt pull to realize and like get it out there. And I also started like a launch mailing list. So when it was ready and I could say that it was live, I already had like a sale of people who felt like they trusted me because they'd seen me, on LinkedIn, on the internet talking about it. I have to be honest as well that I did kind of get lucky by having a lot of success on LinkedIn. I've gone viral many times with some posts. And as a result, just like my network exploded. It's like twice as big as it was before I started the business. Um, and so it's a lot of word of mouth, like I made a sale 2 weeks ago from someone that I've never spoken to, but they were recommended through someone I met on LinkedIn. Instead of one of those things where the more people you know, the more likely you have the ability to be remembered, I think.
Yes, absolutely. And your branding is very clear as well. I sometimes send your little LinkedIn like about me profile for people when they don't know how to write there. This is one of the examples. Like I
Oh,
feel like this
thank
is
you.
very clear. She explained like I always send well like in the like networking community sometimes when we're discussing, I send a few different examples, right? Like entrepreneurs, people who work in companies, some people speak very clearly about themselves, as I mentioned that you do, and I think that yours is actually a very good example. So I'll leave your LinkedIn on the show notes so people can go stalk you a bit and maybe see how you talk about
Oh,
yourself,
thank
and
you. I mean, I haven't
if you don't
no,
mind.
no, no. I'm more than happy. I haven't actually like I don't really publicize this because I spend so much time on the care business at the moment that I'm not doing as much teaching. But I do one-to-one like LinkedIn tuition essentially to help people realize the power of the platform. So there's a lot of like niggles with the algorithm that if you do it one way, you're cutting yourself off to a much larger kind of audience that if you do it another way, you kind of like give yourself the opportunity for your post to spread more. But the crazy thing is that, I learned how to do this and I did my research and I like really worked at it. And then when I put it into action and I teach someone else, I'm not going to name names so that it's like I don't have their permission right now, but someone used my method, and their post reach, no joke, is 1,700% more than it was before they worked with me. It's crazy. Like, it's the difference between, 60 people seeing something and 3,000. It can be that easy if you just kind of know what works. Um, so yeah, I mean, if that's DM me if it's something that you're interested in. That is what I do. One of the many things I
Amazing.
do at the moment.
Yes. So on that note, Jess, I know we're kind of running out of time because we both talk a lot, but
Yes.
I can talk to you forever. Can you tell us a little bit what is sort of a typical day in your life, if you have any, or like what has been like 1 or 2 days that you lived recently? Like you wake up, what do you do? How do you spend your day? I really want to make sure that people understand what the jobs actually entail because I feel a lot of times jobs job roles and job descriptions sound a little more intense than they actually are.
Yeah,
So
for
can
sure.
you give us like a bit of an overview?
So, okay, I usually wake up at like an ungodly hour because my cat is like walking on my face. I kick him out of the bedroom, and then I try and sleep again. Then I wake up at like a more reasonable hour. I usually try to do some exercise or go for a walk earlier in the morning. Otherwise, I will not see daylight and I will be miserable. And then eventually, I will sit down and do some work. A lot of my work takes place on Slack. So Slack, if anyone listening doesn't know, is basically like an instant messaging platform. It's a great place for like employees to communicate with a company. My company is just me and my co-founder, but I made a decision early in our business that we would only use Slack and we wouldn't use WhatsApp. Um, Mostly because I just don't want to not be able to search things in the same way. So it's a lot of chatting back and forth, and then I'll do something that's like useful for work, and it could be as boring as I've got to figure out a new cash flow and get my head around like Excel and things like that that I don't enjoy. Or I might be spending hours on like Canva making content, and that's actually something I do enjoy. So it's not always a good thing. But also sometimes what has been exciting lately is I've had a couple of in-person meetings in our like office space with people. I can't really talk about it, but important people doing interesting things that we're trying to work with. And it could be anything basically. My time is mine to plan, but that also means that my time is mine to waste. So I'm constantly trying to think about how to be more productive or get more out of my days. Um, and then I usually try to log off by between 6 and 7, make dinner with my partner, veg out a little, watch some TV, before the whole thing starts again the next day.
Yeah.
And
And
like
thanks for sharing that.
in between, I have like at this point, I have 3 different email inboxes, and they're always all bulging. It's just like it's a lot. It's always a lot to keep up with.
Yeah. Email, like I managed to get to inbox zero one day this year, and then 2 minutes later, I was like, okay, whatever. This is impossible. But it's okay. I don't actually like we use Slack for that like networking membership, which I love.
Mhm.
But yeah, I don't mind emails as much, but I used to get when I was a music manager, a producer, I used to get no joke 110 emails a day.
Oh yeah.
That was the
I
average because I calculated. I was like, this is insane.
I mean, so when I was working in comms and PR in tech, my inbox was similar. I think there were days when it was higher. I remember I went away for 2 days, like a 2 day break, and I came back to the office on Monday and I had like 500 unread emails, and I was like, "What the hell is going on? What do you even want from me?" Because like we had incoming press requests. We had people who were perhaps like students looking for job opportunities, or we then had all of the like internal stuff that was happening. And this is a company that also used Slack. So there was another place where which like didn't have to be an email. So I totally hear you. But one thing that I found particularly useful in terms of email management, it does cost money. I think it's like maybe 23 or 24 pounds a month, but it's a really big. I consider it like a mental health spend for me. But there's a application that you can connect to your email account called Superhuman, and it makes like triaging or getting through your emails like 5 times as fast, and I invested in it personally for my own pocket when I was in that job, and it changed my job completely. I freed up so much time on real work, like to do other things rather than emails. And then when my kind of my businesses got a bit intense towards the end of last year, I invested in it again as like a personal. I'm not making this like I'm not writing it off in either business. It's like a personal cost to me. Um, Using it again because it helps me get to inbox zero. It helps me feel like my mind is like less cluttered. I'm the kind of person that like loves a newsletter and loves to like stay connected and know what's going on and like feel really plugged in. But when I have hundreds of unread emails, it creates so much anxiety in me that like anything that I can do to help me get through it makes a really big difference. But obviously, it then is like, what am I sacrificing in order to spend that money? You know?
Yes, yes. I've heard about that. I my about Superhuman. I also have lots of like those email tools, and my email it's insane. My inbox is it's people make fun of me all the time about like my systems and my calendars. I don't care. I've been doing this all this time and it's been working. So, I feel like you have to do what's good for you and keeps you sane, as you said. It's very important. At the end of the day, it's good. Your time is money, right? When you're an entrepreneur. So
Totally.
it's about figuring that out, that ratio. which I guess it's a good moment to ask you, Jess, what is one thing that you really love about your job, and what is one thing that you spend a lot of time doing that you didn't anticipate that you would?
One thing that I really love about my job is that everything is on my terms. So for me to decide to that things get to be easy, for example, that I get to like one of the things that a lot of people do when they have a business similar to mine is they do social media ads, right? Like paid ads for your course. But I made a decision that like don't need to do that. I will find other ways. I don't want to feel like I'm just like spending and spending with no clear return. So I just like that like things are on my own terms. That would be my favorite thing. In a similar way, like if I wanted to take a bath at 12 p.m., like in the middle of the day, I could. Like I don't have to get permission. And then something I didn't anticipate spending a lot of my time doing that I do spend a lot of my time doing is probably social media. I am someone who, until this summer, no joke, was like never someone who is on social media. Like I used to really hate Instagram. I had like a love-hate relationship with it because I think that there's like a lot of toxicity and it would make me feel shit. And then similarly, like I was only on LinkedIn because I felt like I had to be there for work and like I never found it fun. And when I changed my relationship with it in order to think about it as not even lead generation, but like making connections and sharing knowledge and being part of a community, it really changed for me. So I think that's interesting because I probably would have thought that I didn't necessarily need it, but it's proving really useful.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. I always tell people to do a sort of a feed refresh and only follow people that bring you sort of joy or inform you or something positive. Like
Hmm.
I usually only hear about gossip like very late on because I don't follow celebrities except like one or two that I really love. And like that, I don't follow any model, any fits, like none of this stuff. So a lot of times people tell things that, have you heard about what happened? And I'm like, I don't even know who this person is. Like, I feel so out of the loop. But I honestly don't care because you have to protect your energy, right? I think that's in a way what you were doing.
I mean,
And
I'm in like two camps there. So I stopped reading the news like early on in the pandemic because I was like, this is too much. But I've been way more engaged lately because it's now really relevant to what I'm doing. And I also, I teach in my kind of PR business that if you don't follow the media, especially the ones that you want to appear in, you have no chance of getting into them because you won't understand what makes them tick. So it's kind of a fine line of deciding like where and when, sorry, I like get my news from. But I totally hear you because like you don't need to be like letting people bring you down.
sorry, I forgot to unmute myself. I'm a genius on my own podcast. Yes, 100%. I'm so good at tech, guys. I'm as good at tech as I'm good in sports. This is a successful podcast. You can 100% trust me to run an online business. You can tell. If the London Marathon is listening, please hire me to be your director. I'm sure I'm gonna nail it. So, um, gotta stay true to yourself. So Jess, I'm almost over with you. I promise I'm gonna let you go and have dinner and all that. Can you tell us what is the one advice you'd like to give your younger self?
I think I would say stop getting in your own way. And by that, I mean basically stop being so hard on yourself. Like, enjoy the ride more. The stress is going to make you forget that you're having fun. And that advice still holds now, like in my 30s, as it did when I was 18.
I love that. That's very good. Can I ask you what would you ask anyone if you could? This could be any person. Can be dead or alive, imaginary, you choose. Like
I was actually thinking about this and I was like, okay, who is the cool like entrepreneur that I should like talk about and have some like interesting thing? And the first thing, no joke, that I thought of was like, I think I would ask Britney Spears if she's okay Blink once for yes, blink twice for no. Because
Oh my God, yes, that's like a public service, like free Britney right now. Yes.
but in all honesty, um, I I don't think I have something that I need to ask someone dead or alive. Like I feel like I have such a great like kind of widespread weird internet community and like my own friends and family of people that I can talk to when I'm kind of need to get through something or work through something. I'm lucky to like have a coach and like have a great co-founder. And I also think never underestimate the power of a chat with your mom, especially if your mom is like my mom and basically like a bad bitch entrepreneur herself, because a lot of the stuff that I get stuck on, when I have a chat with my mom, everything changes. Like I realize and see things in a totally different way. And I think part of that is because she's the founder of her own business. She's had like great success, but she's also of like a different generation and had to deal with things in a way harder way. Even though, we've had a lot of like equality has changed and there's been a lot of, growth. I think that a lot of that resilience that she's built up, it's like nothing phases her. So conversations are always so like they really, really help reframe things. So I don't have one thing to ask. I just know that if I ever have a question, I like talk to my mom. And the funny thing is, like when I do bring something up with her, and we have like a good old chat, and then she realizes that I've been sitting on this for like 2 weeks. She's like, "Why didn't you tell me?" So she clearly thinks that I should be talking to her too.
Wait, is this your Chinese side? No.
Yeah, my mom's Chinese.
Okay. She sounds a little bit like my Jewish relatives as well. I don't know if there's some similarities over
Yeah, I
there.
wouldn't be surprised.
Like, why did you say that to me before? No, no.
I mean, it's always said in a very like like lighthearted, meaningful way, but it's also like, why were you letting yourself stew? I have the answer. I always have the answer. Yeah,
I don't know if you know this about me, Jess, but I do have Chinese family.
really.
It's very strange. Yes, my family loves to mingle. They when they were single, they were really mingly, man. May I just say they were doing international
That's
relations,
awesome.
right? Offset. So I have this cousin. Oh my god, their kids are like the cutest. They're the devil, but they're really cute. Because they're like Jewish Chinese kids. So they're this really
Powerhouses.
crazy mix. Yeah. What?
They're powerhouses. They're gonna take over the world.
Yes. Oh my God. Yes. It's no joke. My cousin makes like the worst jokes about that. Like, I'm like, you cannot say this anymore in this world that we live in. But yeah.
But
So
like,
they
don't
are,
stop
yeah,
because that's hilarious.
I know, but it's incredible. I mean, but they had three kids in 4 years.
Wow.
And according to my cousin, it's the greatest blessing that he wouldn't want to wish on his worst enemy. But their house is a chaos zone, but it's really fun.
It sounds
I don't know how
really
to
hard.
say anything though, but she gives me the best herbs like in the world. Wherever I'm ill, she's like, I have this herb, I have this tea, I have this thing, and it's incredible. So, one day I'm gonna visit my new family in Beijing. Who knows?
I love that. I'm usually that person or at least in my house. I'm always like, "Oh, you're not well? Have this please take my mushrooms. They will help you."
But man, some of this stuff is really like effective.
I
Like
mean,
some of
you
this
have to
stuff is really
remember,
good.
like traditional Chinese medicine has been around a lot longer than Western medicine. And there's a lot of scientific like basis there. I think that it kind of like it's overdue a bit of a um I think like a branding exercise to make it relevant for later generations. But I think it's coming. I think we'll see it. Like if we're gonna do um predictions and stuff. I think we will see somebody revolutionize and modernize traditional Chinese medicine for the masses, and it's going to be like somehow like sexy and cool. Maybe it's going to be millennial pink and in like an aluminum can with green writing.
Oh my god, no, no more. Maybe let's see. Maybe Gen Z will figure
Exactly.
something out. Maybe it's gonna be millennial orange or something, Z orange,
Gen Z orange.
whatever. Gen Z orange. So Jess, I'm gonna let you go finally. I promise. I think you still have to tell us, or you don't have to, but it would be nice if you could tell us three recommendations of things that you've enjoyed lately. So songs, books, podcasts, films, whatever it is.
Of course. Um, if you are someone who like gets in your own way, like I mentioned earlier, or you suffer from anxiety or you're hard on yourself, I highly recommend a book called The Four Agreements. It's really short. It also is an audiobook if you are that way inclined, but it's essentially like four agreements to make with yourself in order to live a happier life. I'm not going to give them all away, but like one of them is like, don't take things personally. And the way that it's set out in this very short book, it's really, really, um, it's really like easy to absorb and just makes perfect sense, even though it's the most simple concepts. I highly recommend it. So that's the first one. The second one is if you are a creative person, but you are struggling with creativity in some way, I would really recommend a book called Rebel Ideas by Matthew Said. It is incredible. It really talks about how we are limiting our own creativity by operating in spaces that are populated by the same type of people. Like, for example, you're not going to have diversity of thinking if every employee of your business is like a white man in his 40s, right? So the whole book talks about really great examples of that and just makes you think a lot wider. And maybe, if you are a creative listening to this, it'll make you think about collaborating in a space that's unusual for you. And then finally, I guess maybe on a bit of a lighter note, I recently discovered podcasts that are kind of like an audio drama. There's a really great podcast company called Wondery, and they have so many that like I just keep just typing their name into the like podcast search instead of looking at any charts or anything and just listening to their own stuff. But I recommend one called Blood Ties. It's kind of like a radio drama, I guess. I really, really enjoyed it. I was listening to it while like making dinner and I didn't want it to stop. I started listening to it like in the shower. So I just wanted to get through it. It's a great story. So yeah, those are my three recommendations.
Jess, thank you so much. If anyone wants to connect with you, first of all, where should they do it? What's the thing that they should say? And when we're in non-COVID times, if they want to take you out for a drink to, talk to you and connect with you, what should they get you?
What should they get me as a drink?
Yeah.
I am a decaf oat milk flat white drinker, as niche and awkward as possible. Um, and in terms of where you can find me, I'm at No Agency Method on Instagram, but I'm also on LinkedIn, just Jessica Barlow. I always welcome DMs if you think I can help, if you are struggling with breaking into the industry, if you need advice, if you are, I don't know, if you're just someone that needs a bit of hyping, feel free to get in touch because I think that I wish I had had more support when I was trying to get into advertising myself or tech or being an entrepreneur.
Or all of those things
All
at
of
the
those
same
things
time.
all the time.
Jess, thanks again so much for all your time and your wisdom and for sharing it even more with us on the mentoring program. I look forward to speaking to you soon. Thank you for listening to the Island Networking Podcast. If you've enjoyed that conversation, why not send it to a friend? Rate, review, or subscribe to our podcast because really that helps us a lot. We also have a membership scheme, a mentoring program, online events, digital resources, and much more. To get involved with us and figure out everything that we do, just head over to ilightnetworking.uk or find us on Instagram at ilightnetworking. We have more incredible guests coming up next week, so don't forget to tune in every Friday for the podcast. See you next time.